Hey everybody, welcome to Overcoming Average. Today's guest is my good friend Brandon Berg.
Howdy.
It's such a pleasure, man, to have you on the podcast. Our history goes way back, and I'm excited to kind of dig into stuff. I've noticed with the podcast, even people I've known for a decade or 20 years, I find stuff out about them I never knew. But so I just wanted to start out by talking about where you came from. Like, to me, I've known you for 15 or 20 years. Maybe.
Yeah, our family moved here in '99, and we started going to Hickory Grove Baptist, pretty much right away. And so I knew somewhere along those lines. Yeah,
because to me, you've always, and I think this is a major compliment, but you've always seemed like a California guy.
Right.
You've just, even though you've moved in the '90s, you're very much a California guy, which is awesome. But so tell us about life before North Carolina, and then how you got here, and what led you here, and
Sure.
that sort of thing.
So I was born in 1988 in Santa Cruz, California, and that's technically Northern California. If you were to draw a line right down the middle of California, cutting it in north and south, I would say it's probably just above the line. So people think of California as kind of like, I think people think of like LA, like Southern California when they think of that, but it's a little different. Like there's definitely still some of those things, like they call it what people joke, like the land of fruits and nuts or whatever. Right.
But, and I had the pleasure of visiting that place, and it was very the surfing capital of the world is in Santa Cruz. Yeah, which is, it's just crazy. There's people surfing, and it's freezing cold. It's awesome.
Yeah. That's a big thing that people don't know is, like, the water in Southern California is pretty warm, but you have to wear, like, if you're going to surf, or like, my brother and I would just wear wetsuits even when we played in the water, like any time of the year.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't a surfer. I liked skimboarding. That was my thing. I wanted to be a surfer, but for whatever reason I got into skimboarding as a little kid, which was cool because, you look like an idiot when you're starting out doing that. So, and when you have no shame as a child, it's easy to, you can mess up and all that stuff. I don't do it anymore. I've hurt myself too many times.
Yeah, you're too old now.
Yeah. I've got responsibilities. But yeah, so it was basically, we moved right after my 11th birthday. So it was kind of one of those things where I have tons and tons of memories of living on the West Coast, but it was just right before that period where I was going to be like semi-independent, So I had a lot of memory, like in my teenage adolescent years, like I had a lot of these like feelings of like, man, if I still lived in California, I'd be riding my bike with a little surfboard rack on the side. After school, I'd be going to surf. Like I had a lot of these like feelings of like that was taken from me. So it was interesting because so I have tons of memories, but I wasn't like a surfer California. I was just, when you grow up on the beach, you don't think of yourself as like a beach bum or whatever. You just live in California.
Right.
I was a pretty normal kid. Like my brother and I went to a private school because, I think the school systems there aren't as good as they are here in North Carolina, public schools. So we went to like a private school, and not like my family could afford it, but somehow they did.
Yeah.
We lived in my brother and I shared a bedroom. We had a little 2-bedroom house a few blocks from the beach. But I do still have tons of really good, like we would have birthday parties at the beach. We would have bonfires, and I do have a lot of really like fond memories of that, that kind of stuff. But like I said, it was just normal, like.
Well, and I think as far as age and stuff goes, I've been thinking about this because one of my friends, Tatiana, she's from Ukraine, and she has an accent, but she moved when she was 14.
Yeah.
But there's other people from other parts of the country and other parts of the world that you would never know. They seem like they're from North Carolina,
right?
So it's something about that age. It's like maybe you brought that California with you at 11. And so what brought you? Was it your dad?
Yeah, my dad was gonna get a job working for NASCAR.
Really?
Yeah, he's always been like my dad is one of those dudes that just knows how to work on almost any.
Yeah.
He's built houses, he's built cars, he can do plumbing, he can do electrical work. He's really good at that stuff. So my dad actually moved out to North Carolina like a year or so before we did, and he was living with some friends. It was actually a pretty dark time for him. I remember him writing us letters and just hearing my dad say things like, we've talked about our dads before, is like, they're very loving people, but they weren't raised to be emotional.
Yep.
And so every once in a while your parents will get really emotional about things, and it's this weird mixture of startling like you like it, but it's also not familiar. So yeah, I remember I have this vivid memory of getting, my dad writes on those yellow legal pads.
Oh yeah.
And getting handwritten letters, 3 or 4 pages from my dad talking about all the stuff he was doing.
Wow.
How much he missed us.
You still have those?
I don't know. I'm sure my mom does.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
that'd be awesome.
But yeah, so he moved out and he was kind of like interning with these like NASCAR. He would be like in the pits. I can't remember what he was trying to do, but he was going to get a job building cars. I can't remember. There's teams. There's there's actual the race car drivers and the cars themselves, but then there's a team that will own multiple cars. And so I can't remember what team it was that he was going to work for, but a bunch of teams lost their sponsorships like around the time that we were going to move here. So we ended up still moving here, but he didn't end up working for NASCAR.
Well, and he took a job at Philip Morris, right?
Yeah, and before that, he worked at a place called Steel Fab.
Steel Fab.
They made these like big.
I just think of your dad and Philip Morris. I guess like it used to be a huge tobacco factory.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
He
I don't
loved
know what
that
you call
job.
it,
He doesn't smoke at all, but it was like a cush job.
Well, it was a very good job at the time, and I'm wondering if there's a link to the loss of sponsorships and the racing industry back then was the Winston Cup.
Right.
It was like a cigarette brand. Yeah. And then, it kind of went away. And I just total tangent, but the policy was just enforced a couple weeks ago for you can't buy tobacco unless you're 21.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
It's crazy because just thinking about in our lifetime, it was very reasonable to have a cigarette sponsorship for billboards and
the Marlboro Man,
the whole thing. But so I think
I remember when you could smoke in restaurants.
Oh yeah,
that was.
I'm kind of glad that's gone.
Being like, I have vivid memories of going to restaurants as a kid. And my parent, they're asking, "Do you want smoking or non-smoking?"
Yeah,
like non-smoking, definitely non-smoking.
You're in Pizza Hut, and they put you in the non-smoking section, 1 seat away from the guy wafting smoke. Pizza.
Have you ever seen that blog that's like, or it's not a blog, or maybe it's an Instagram account or something that's like buildings that used to be Pizza Huts?
Oh no!
Yeah,
that sounds.
Yeah, because most of all the Pizza Huts have gone out of business, but you can always tell a Pizza Hut. Yeah, the shape of it,
right?
It looks like a straw hat or something like that.
That's awesome.
But
I just think about Philip Morris and your dad and stuff, and it's kind of weird to see that industry. I remember driving by and smelling. You could smell the tobacco.
Yeah.
And then actually, just up the street was the S&D Coffee.
Yep.
And man, the smell from that place.
I know.
Amazing.
I know. Every time I drive past, I don't go to that area of Concord anymore.
Yeah.
But every time I drive past, I'm like, yep, I feel like I'm 12 again.
Yeah, it's such a unique smell. That only people from this area and probably really even that decade would know the smell of Philip Morris. And all the people I knew that worked there, it was just a job. It wasn't like, oh, I like cigarettes, so I'm going to go work for Philip Morris. It was just a really good job with.
But you could get free cigarettes.
Really?
My dad, I can't remember if it was like a carton or a pack, but like every day you could take home a certain amount of cigarettes, like a stipend.
That's crazy.
If you worked there. And of course, he never did.
Right.
And there's probably rules that you couldn't like sell them to people or get in trouble.
Man. So he was here for a year, and you were 11. Then you guys moved here.
Mm-hmm.
So then what was the next stage of life? Was that a tough adjustment, or were you kind of young enough to where it didn't affect you too much?
It was an interesting time. Like I remember being sad when we left, but more excited about the new adventure in front of us, right? So I turned 11, and then that was 5th grade. My I started 5th grade right after we moved here. And so I was like the new cool kid.
California
yeah,
guy.
like all the like I remember when like lip gloss and gel pens were popular, right?
Yes.
So I remember like being on the bus on like field trips, and the girls would like write little notes, like, and they would they'd put on lip gloss and kiss pieces of paper and write things. And I didn't do anything other than just be, the new guy, but I was from California or whatever.
Right.
So, but I was just this little dopey kid. And so, that first year was really cool. I made friends in my neighborhood. We built, like dirt ramps in there was still building little parts of our neighborhood. So I remember we would build these dirt ramps and ride our bikes and jump and do just boy stuff. And then, let's see. So what we would do every summer when we lived in California was we had these friends, one of my best friend, and my best friend's parents were friends, with my parents. And we would rent a houseboat for a week and go to Lake Shasta, which is in way up Northern California. So what I did was my brother and I, after a year after living in North Carolina, we went back to California to just hang out for a month.
Wow.
And we did the houseboat thing, and I just bounced around with my friends. I stayed with one family and stayed with another family, and it was just this whole thing. It's hard to remember. It's a combination of things. It's one, like, preteen hormones changing, this feeling of going back home and experiencing all these things, and just a whole bunch of stuff. My best friend's mom was this very like nurturing person, just kind of spoiled you. And so I came back, and this thing hit me like a wave, just massive wave. It's the first time I remember like really having depression. But I was a child, so I didn't have vocabulary for things,
right.
And like, especially now these days, like the millennial stereotype is we're like the therapy generation, and we're like really open about our emotions.
Right.
But, as a kid, you're just like, I don't know, I feel so I had all these things. I had obsessive compulsive disorder, like germaphobe thing happening, anxiety, depression, everything at once. I actually saw like the school counselor. I was in 6th grade, talking about all these things. And so, when I came back, I felt like I realized that I missed California. And also it was my first year of 6th grade, right? It's like starting all over again.
Lots of changes.
I went from being this cool kid to being absolutely terrified of going to middle school. I had no idea what to expect. I remember like being in tears going to the open house a week or two before school started, and just being like, I don't want to do it, Mom. I don't want to do it. That feeling whenever you cry really hard and like you're like dehydrated and your chest is like, I remember feeling how that felt like.
Wow.
And
one of the things that you and I have always had in common is this like, it's hard to encapsulate, but like a sense of humor that's super bizarre,
Sure.
Tim and Eric and stuff. Most people are like, that's super
grew up on
weird.
Three Stooges.
Yeah, Three Stooges and stuff. But then there's also a side of depth where I think you and I always enjoy conversations about humanity and sort of like how the mind works and what's affected you, and just, whether it be just mental health or spirituality or something. But because I don't know if that goes hand in hand, but some sort of like you don't take yourself too serious, and life's just sort of lighthearted and silly, but also it's kind of serious.
I feel like, it's like it's a weird thing, because I feel like it's hard to compare yourself to other people, like what's truly sad or like what's truly depressing. But I feel like if you have a constant base level of like melancholy, or just you feel things heavily, then like it takes more for you to be sad. So you'll like make dark jokes about things that are really sad, and people are like, God, that's like,
right.
And you're like laughing at it, and they're like, that's really depressing. You think that's funny? You're like, well, dude, then you don't really want to know what I actually
What's
think
actually
about it. Yeah, you know.
Well, it's funny this morning because I've been called melancholy before, and I don't think that I am. I feel like a very joyful. I'm happy with life.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes my demeanor comes off like I'm angry or I'm depressed or something. And of course, obviously, sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But this morning it was a little bit of an exercise in like testing some of that stuff out with my girls because my middle child said, she said, "Dad, why are you so sad?" And I was just like making coffee, and I thought somehow I'm giving, and she's very sensitive to emotion.
Perceptive.
Somehow I'm giving off the impression that I'm sad.
Yeah.
So I went totally over the top and was just like making a super
Silly man.
yeah, super smiley, happy, and then
Like a little girl.
yeah. But it's funny because all of my children were just like laughing and smiling and stuff, and so there's something about like sort of hopefully reflecting how you actually feel.
Yeah.
But also getting over like my natural tendency to be sort of melancholy and maybe that affects how people think.
Well, if you watch like any of those documentaries about guys like Robin Williams and stuff, you know,
Oh,
classic stories are like they have these like they're this deep well of emotion.
Yeah.
And so their ability I don't know. I can only assess myself so much,
Right.
so I don't really know. But people say that people like that who like can really truly feel like deep emotions also have this crazy ability to like change a room when they walk in and
Totally.
make
Well,
everybody
like
feel happy. And
another actor that comes to mind is Jim Carrey. Like he used to be so silly, crazy, like The Mask and Ace Ventura, like totally.
But he's
over the
also
top.
done these really like emotional movies at the same time.
Like
He's got
for me, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was a movie that I love the movie.
Yeah.
But it's such a weird because in sequence, I think he did Truman Show or another one that was serious. But I remember that movie coming
or like
out.
number 23.
Yeah,
there was an intense movie.
There was something that's like, wait, that's Jim Carrey, the guy that was like throwing himself off of a cruise ship as the Farmer Bill or whatever the characters from SNL.
Oh yeah.
Or from I forget the name.
Living
of the show.
Color.
In Living Color, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, to that point, I think some of us, and maybe it's just at extremes. You know, we're extreme emotional in the good and the bad.
Yeah.
You know, but so let's talk about your musical career because
Oh sure.
one of the things that is so crazy about you is you were my first guitar student.
Yeah.
Ever,
Yeah.
Which I have to say, like, I'm so proud of you and how you've come because to see like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, and your mom came to me and said, "Can you teach Brandon how to play guitar?" And I was like, "Sure." You know,
Yeah.
I think I was making like $7 or something. I don't know. and I thought it was amazing. But
That's the same way I started teaching guitar too.
Yeah.
It was when I was playing at some church and someone came up and was like, "Hey, somebody said that you teach guitar," or they were talking to a group of people.
Yeah.
And I knew who they were actually talking about, and they weren't in the circle. And I knew if I didn't speak up that they would get the job.
Oh, good
and so
for you.
I was just like,
ambitious.
"Yeah, I teach guitar." I had no idea how to teach guitar, you know. And then same thing.
Well, and I think it for me, it helped me to grow because I had to think about, what am I going to teach this guy?
You had
like
to figure out what you
week.
actually know and how to explain it.
Yeah, and I think it's a great exercise because right after I started teaching you, I took on another student, and then at one point in my life, I mean, that's what I did for a living. But so how old were you when that happened? I can't remember.
Well, I had already been playing guitar for a year or so before I started. So let's back up.
Yeah.
Remember I was talking about 6th grade, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So first summer camp I ever went to was the summer after 6th grade, I think, or maybe before 6th grade. I can't remember. I'm struggling right now. But this was, so we Hickory Grove Baptist Church, for the longest time, they would go to this place in South Carolina, right? I can't remember.
Bob.
Yeah. But there was 1 year that they went, my very first year, they only went to this place one time, and it was in Florida. I don't know. You remember that?
I don't remember.
It was in Florida, middle of nowhere. It was hot, cockroaches everywhere. You remember? I hadn't lived in the South very long, and so this was like more the South, just like they had this gross little pond that we rode jet skis around in, right. And like the dorms were gross. Anyways, so this is all part of the story. So, we, here's all the things that happen at camp, right? You have your games, you have the guy speaking, you have the theme, right? And then you have the band. And so the guy who led worship, I don't know if he still lives around here. I know his name was Lee Tuning, right? Yep. You knew Lee Tuning.
Yeah.
So I looked like a miniature version of Lee Tuning.
I remember that. Yes, you did.
Yeah. And I've got a picture of him, and we're sitting next to each other on stage, and it's like, I don't look like him.
Right.
Like at whatever age he was when that happened.
Either you look like a grown man or he looked like a boy.
Right. Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah. When I got to his age that he was when we took those pictures, I didn't look like him anymore.
Yeah.
But back then we both wore glasses. We had like a narrow face, like short haircut.
Yep.
And so there was this whole thing of like everyone, they called me Mini Lee. And like, and remember, like that, I wasn't cool at this point. Like I was like nerdy, like, but this was like my identity for that week,
Yeah.
And so we even did this thing where they had like a talent show. And so I talked with Lee, and we agreed that we would do this thing where I would pretend to be him. I would play his guitar. It was me, Michael Bird. Michael Bird still is around here. Zach Hosey pretended to play bass.
Yeah.
And then I think the drummer had to play because the drums were on the stage. But what they did was they all stood backstage and played their instruments, and we pretended. And it was a disaster. Like I was so nervous. I was shaking. We did, what was that song? I want to be like Daniel in the lion's den, waiting for, So I pretend, we would do that song every night because it had hand motions and stuff.
Yeah.
And so basically, it was like, all right, you look like Lee, he plays guitar, you're going to learn how to play guitar. Because around that time, I was good friends with your younger brother, Weston, still am.
Yep.
And so he, it was just and then Jordan Spicer, his brother played drums. And so we were all buddies. And most of my buddies had older brothers who played instruments. So it was kind of set, their course was set for them. You were going to play drums. Zach, you're tall, so you're going to play bass. Right. Or his sister had a bass or something. And then, Weston's going to sing. And so it was like, well, Brandon, you look like Lee, so you're going to play acoustic guitar, right? And then around that time, like our youth group was, trying to get a band together. There was all these different iterations of it. They called it COG at one point, and they called it like all these different things. And so it was like, Brandon, you're going to play guitar. And that was my destiny to play acoustic guitar. And so I started, my mom got me, we lived in, Concord. And so we went to Molus Music in downtown Concord.
Oh, yes.
And that's where I got my first guitar. It was a Galveston piece of crap.
Yeah.
But it's like your parents are like,
yeah.
I'm so emotionally volatile. Like they're like, he's going to give up. He gets too frustrated.
They don't want to invest too much money. Yep.
And so they bought me a guitar. And I remember having this guitar. I remember actually going over to your parents' house one time for like a sleepover. And I brought my guitar because there was a couple other guys who played guitar. Yeah. And but I didn't know how to play it. Like I literally would just sit it on my lap and like bang on. Like I had it flat,
Mm-hmm.
I had it for a year because I thought I was going to self-teach. I got the Mel Bay guitar chord book and, but I remember like being inspired. There was remember Brandon Moore? There was another,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about people are listening that don't know.
Yep.
But he was already playing Blink-182 songs. And, I remember you
him
telling Weston, like, listen to him up there in the bonus room. Why aren't you learning how to play guitar? And I just remember thinking, I need to learn how to do this, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere along the lines, we bought my guitar at Molus, and then finally I started getting lessons there. Mm-hmm. And I told the guy I wanted to learn Beatles song. His name was John, and he had he was this character. He had long, flowing, jet black hair. He wore Dreamcatcher earrings. He wore the same like crew neck crew neck sweatshirts have come back, but then they weren't cool. You know, he had this like old, like heathered gray crew neck sweatshirt that said it was like a national park or something on it. Acid wash jeans that were too short, New Balance shoes, right? And he'd always cross his legs when he played guitar, and he had like a Strat, and he just could shred. I remember he would keep the door cracked before I'd come into lessons, so I'd come in for a minute and listen to him just shredding. Wow. But I told him I wanted to learn Beatles songs because I loved the Beatles, and he'd be like, well, they're a little ahead of their time. And I'm like, well, that was the 60s. Have we caught up yet? You know, right. But he was right. They were complex, but that's what I wanted to learn. And he taught me like Day Tripper and stuff like that, like riffs. But I figured out, I had a couple other friends who took guitar lessons from him, and I figured out he taught us all the same thing. It would be like Push by Matchbox 20, Stand By Me, all the classic G major chords, you know?
Yep.
Eventually I got fed up with him and just was like, I'm not learning what I want to learn. Like I figured out how to play bar chords on my own because I went to the very back of the Mel Bay guitar chord book and movable shapes. Because I remember talking about that guy who learned how to play Green Day songs, like I'm like, okay, those don't look like what you're teaching me. I'm playing these chords down here, and they sound like, you know, cheesy folk songs. Yeah. I'm playing Green Day, but it doesn't sound right. And I'm like, oh, those shapes.
Right.
So I figured out how to play them on my own, and I'd come in and I'd show him what I was only halfway there. I only learned like one position, so it was back and forth, and it looked sloppy. And he was intimidated by that I could figure out stuff by ear, kind of.
Really?
And so we started catching on to that, and I just stopped taking lessons for a while. And then somewhere along the lines, that's when I went over to you.
Right.
And I wanted you to teach me how to jam, you know, how to like improvise, how to play things. I'm like, I can hear this, and this is what I know, and there's this huge gap in between the two. And so that's when you taught me like positions and stuff, and how to play, like how to improvise lead guitar. But it wasn't like soloing. It was that middle ground between strumming chords and then playing a guitar solo. Yeah. You know, and you taught me like Incubus songs and Lifehouse and whatever was popular back then, you know.
Oh yeah.
Fun stuff.
Well, it's funny because there's I think about a few times, sort of the waves of like your skill level growing. And a few things I distinctly remember was when you kind of moved over and you got your electric guitar. You had the wooden amp. You're the only guy I know that has the J Tercer.
Like I still have that amp.
Of course you do. Yeah. I mean, I have my first amp.
I can't let go of things.
And it's been like kicked in and cracked. And
yeah, one of the it had like a speaker behind it, but then it had a diamond shape.
Yeah,
like
the old wood slats.
Yeah, and like the slat got
It's actually
broken.
A really interesting looking amp, to be honest.
And it sounds cool,
cheap.
dude.
Yeah.
It has the overdrive channel, sounds rad.
But then there's a picture in my photo library, and of course, I mean, now this was pre-iPhone, you know, where we would just take on a night where now you would take 100 pictures, you'd have like 7.
Yeah.
And it was actually I can't remember the Christian music station at the time, but it was 91.9.
Sure.
Whatever the Christian station was named at the time. They had a battle of the bands.
Yeah.
And my band at the time added a few of you guys, like the younger generation. So Weston and you, I remember, joined the band.
Jordan, too.
And Jordan, yeah, because I think for whatever reason, Justin couldn't play. Jordan played, brothers and all. But I remember that night. I saw that in my photo album. You're wearing that like teal shirt with like the Indian.
I still have that shirt.
With like
I got that at a thrift store in California.
Yeah, it's such a California.
It has button like pearl snaps. It has 2 eagles, like Native American.
Yeah. Like totem poles.
Yeah. It doesn't fit anymore, but I can't get rid of it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shirt. But I remember that night, and we won the Battle of the Bands.
That's true.
I remember that night being so special for me because it was like you had like gotten great at guitar and you're like playing alongside me. So that was very special. But then to win, I think we were the destined losers because it was on the other side of town and nobody knew who we were.
Yeah,
but
the underdogs.
We were the underdogs, and we just I think we made a strategic decision to save the powerful song for if we got to round 2. Remember that? So we played a song that was pretty good, and we got to round 2, and it was like the top 3.
Yeah.
And we saved the I think it Bring Me Back. You remember that song, Bring Me Back? I think we saved that song to blow the roof off the end. When we won.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we got recording time at some
Were we
studio.
half the class at this point?
I think that was the name.
That was the
still
name of the
half
band?
the class. So we won. We got studio time, and we got a Chris Tomlin signed miniature Yamaha guitar.
I thought it was a Baby Taylor.
It was a Baby Taylor,
yeah, Big Baby,
which is now warped and totally useless. But anyway, those were some. It was funny to see.
I don't know if we were the best band or the least bad band.
Oh, we were definitely the least bad, but I mean, there were a lot. There was a lot going on that night, and that turned into a lot of other things. But anyway, that was. I distinctly remember, wow, that was cool. You played with us, with me in particular that night. So since then, you've played in churches, you played in worship bands, you've played in cover bands. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in a band?
Yeah, I've been in a couple.
Cool. So talk about those for a little bit.
Well, I haven't been in a band that toured.
Right.
That's never been a thing that I've really done. I don't know why. I didn't have that thing where I've always been playing music, but I've been in a band that extensively toured where, right. I went to college, I didn't right. do that thing where you just were a bum, living on the road forever. But let's see, when I was in college, I was in a band with a few guys. We started off as a band called Native America, and then that was already taken. So we were the Young Wild. We even filmed some videos, and we released some stuff, but the guy ended up moving. And so that was kind of short lived, and I have a few bands that I play in now that are more it's more like the person's name and right. then they have a band.
Yeah. Well, and that's the struggle of a guitar player, right? And I actually believe this philosophy. I didn't at the time, but the world is very much artist driven.
Yeah.
Actually, last time you were over,
well, we grew up in band culture,
right?
Incubus, Creed,
right?
These are all my favorite bands. Like Incubus, Creed, POD,
right?
DC Talk,
Stained,
right? Yeah. And so that's just not. There's still plenty of bands out,
sure.
Maybe more than ever before, but there's this move towards not necessarily.
Right.
It's the band thing has proven someone's kind of burst the bubble on the miserable touring musician in a band thing. Now it's people are going, oh, do we have to still do that?
Right.
Not that people aren't still doing that, but they've figured out other ways around it. Being a musician is much different now with technology being
totally.
what it is. So I've still got that. I'm in between two worlds where I'm trying to establish myself as an artist, as Brandon Berg, but I still kind of want to have a band where it's not my name.
Well, to be honest, a lot of the band stuff for me, I was always in a band. Right. I was never like the Chad Keith show. I never cared about that. For me, being in a
when
band,
you're a guitar player too, you're stuck. You're at the mercy of someone. You're always waiting for someone to validate you and be like, "Hey, I like what you do. Yeah. I think it will fit well with my songs that I'm writing."
Right.
You're always waiting for someone to sweep you up and put your little signature on a thing that's already established.
Right. Well, and for me, I've discovered over the years what I loved about being in a band was collaborating with other people.
Yeah.
And even more than that, it's growing a thing.
Yeah.
I always liked trying to get the posters printed up and put them on windows of vans at Carowinds to try to get a gig at a youth event. I mean, I was always hustling, doing that kind of stuff. I was just channeling my energy into creativity in the sense of a band, because I didn't know anything better. And of course, that shifted for me. But I have personally liked to see you shift into the Brandon Berg world. I think it's awesome, especially here in Davidson, Cornelius. Almost everybody I talk to knows you because if they go to Summit Coffee if they go to any open mic nights or anything, or they already know you.
Yeah.
Either because you're performing or one of your students is performing, which is so awesome. So what are you currently working on? I know you released an album. When was that? A year ago now?
It was let's see, it was November, like mid-November
2018, right?
2018. Yeah.
Which, again, I don't want to like keep pushing that, but it was a super proud moment for me, just as your teacher for that period of time, to see like you actually do something, because there's so many musicians that talk, and they don't ever do anything. Like there'll never be an album that you can hold in your hands. Or,
well, it took me a long time to get there, man.
Sure.
I mean, there's two different kinds of like artists, I feel like, in the world. There's the ones that are like the hustlers, you know, the people that like, I don't know what you call it, the fake it till you make it people. Not that they're all faking it, but like they don't have that thing in their brain that goes, but I'm missing this and this. I can't start until they just like, they project themselves into it and they figure it out as they go, you know? And then there's the other kind of they're just filled with self-doubt. And like the artistic temperament of like, but I don't know, man. There's so many people out in the world that aren't that good at what they're doing. I don't want to be one of those people. Right. You're more critical on yourself than everyone else is. And so it takes you forever to pull the trigger on stuff.
And you're so right. Like even with this podcast, like the idea of overcoming averages it's kind of been a thing in the back of my mind that some of the most brilliant people may either just be lazy, or they're afraid, or they're you know, their mom said something to them when they were a kid and made them feel like insecure about releasing content or making a song, or
which is crazy because my parents have only ever been supportive.
Well, and I was going to mention your mom earlier, like we talked about your dad, but your mom, since the beginning of your musical career, she's always been there. She's at everything. Yeah. I think that's great.
My biggest fan.
She's the biggest fan. She's great. She loves it, and it's awesome. But so you released an album, and one thing that we've actually talked about this on the phone, but and I like that you're doing that, is now the way our culture shifted. I think there's very much a push to, instead of have like, okay, I worked on this album for 5 years, 2 years. You're like, I got a great song. I can sit down at home or at a friend's studio or something and record the song quickly and release it.
Yeah.
Because fortunately or unfortunately, our culture like just can't. I feel like we can't handle a double disc album anymore. Like I mean, that was my first CD, was A Melancholy and Infinite Sadness.
Yeah.
Like 25 songs or something crazy.
No way. I didn't know that. I didn't realize so many songs were on that record.
I mean, it might be more. I don't know. It's a massive, massive record. Yeah. But like, I get bored now listening to it. But I remember back then I would listen to it and then put the other CD in and listen to that one.
I used to buy CDs and listen to them. I mean, I did fall in love with them, but it was like you would listen to the CD over and over again out of necessity. You're like, I paid $18 for this Third Eye Blind CD.
Yeah, you got to get your money out of it.
I'm going to listen to this over and over again. Yeah. You know, I remember like being resistant to when Spotify came out, because I was like, but what about like listening to something over and over and over again?
I mean, it does take away from like, there'll never be a Dark Side of the Moon again. Like a piece that's kind of the whole thing, where it's the art in the album that you're looking at while you're listening to the music, and the music, and you know, even creativity with like how you would make the CDs. But you know, that's just the way it is. There used to be vinyl, then tapes, and the little book in the tape, and now we're on the CD. But I think culturally, I think it's a great idea for you to continue like popping out a song or two here.
Yeah, I released a single like at the end of this summer.
Awesome.
And it sounds totally, so I did that EP. It's called the Elderson. And then I was like, okay, well, I've got more stuff I want to do. But in order to release that EP, I had to do a Kickstarter. And so it wasn't just getting myself to believe that I had songs that people wanted to hear.
Right.
Even though people were telling me, dude, I really like your songs. I don't know why you're not recording them. So once I believed that people needed to hear these songs, then I had to get myself pumped up to do a Kickstarter campaign, to like believe that people actually wanted to give me money to do it.
Right. Because it's not cheap. I mean, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
I think
to make a good record, it costs way more money than you think.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of our EPs back in the day was $55,000 or so. I mean, it's crazy how much it used to be. That same stuff can be done at a fraction of the cost now, which is great. But yeah, I love that you're doing that. And I like, for me, and of course I'm super critical of local artists, and a lot of it I feel like is just kind of people trying to mimic other local people that they like and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yours kind of has a brand that's like, that's you, you know, it's rock and roll. It's
definitely wanted it to sound like a rock and roll album.
Yeah.
Like, cause what I did was I decided I have a few different like modes that I remember. That's funny. I actually remember way back in the day when I was your guitar student and I drove with you one time to run errands. And I remember going through Concord. I think we were looking for a drum throne because your James, your keyboard player, needed one.
Okay.
Like a throne.
Yeah.
We were driving around, and I remember the first time I ever vocalized that I wasn't writing. I was creative, but I didn't know how to write music. I had no idea. And I remember actually saying, dude, if I were to write music, I have no idea what I would do because I like so many different things. How do you just make something and decide what it's going to sound? Cause I like the way this sounds, but I'm also way over here. Like, what do you do with that? You know?
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to just kind of like pull the trigger. I don't know if you remember that conversation. But anyways,
I don't, but you're right. Like there's a sort
you think your way out of things.
Yeah. Totally.
Rather than just doing it. So even on that EP, there's a few different sounds, even though there is cohesiveness to it. There is a few different sounds. And what I decided to do was I was going to only record songs that I had written on an acoustic guitar. Because I have a bunch of like sketches that I would get a looper and like make different guitar things. But those weren't songs. They were all instrumental. And I was like, all right, you know, I called up my buddy Jacob Early. I said, hey, I know I've been talking about this with you forever. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a Kickstarter, and I want to do an EP with you. Yeah. And so, you know, once I finally got the money, we sat down and I said, here's all the songs that I have. And we kind of went through, and like I said, they were all songs that were mostly finished with an acoustic guitar, lyrics and melody and chords and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, but I wanted him to, I still wanted to flex like the rock thing whenever I could. So there's a few songs on there that are, picking on an acoustic guitar, but there's also a few of them too where we started with, a scratched out acoustic guitar and vocal demo, but then added drums, added electric guitar, added organ, added all that stuff.
I think it's very wise to start with acoustic because if you can make it sound awesome, it's easy to make something sound awesome with a really loud guitar amp. Like you can just scratch the strings and it sounds powerful,
right?
But when you're riff writing, I think it's important to write a good, clean. It's just like writing on a piano, with no effects. Just it's a linear.
It still blows my mind that the bands that we grew up listening to, like, wrote riff rock and then lyrics over top of that. There's not a chord progression.
Oh yeah,
sometimes there are, but take Creed for example. You almost have to have a front man who doesn't sing and play guitar. And so the band just, you got so-and-so tuned into drop D, and then the drums and the bass. And then it's like speaking in tongues. You just like, you just make up lyrics and melodies as you go. It's almost like the lyrics and the melody are it's more about the sound than it is like writing a song that you could strum on an acoustic guitar. It's like the vibe.
Well, I know.
I think that kept me from doing stuff for a long time because that's what I grew up listening to. And I was like, yeah, but I know how to do this. How do you write lyrics on top of it?
Right. Well, I know for a fact now, if you haven't watched the masterclass from Tom Morello, it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
But Tom Morello writes all of his riffs on acoustic guitar. Well, I mean,
that's crazy.
Rage Against the Machine. So
I love that.
So yeah, I think that's probably a good practice to take from a professional.
I tell all my students that like want to move to electric guitar. I'm like, I know you think that electric guitar is rock and roll, and it is.
Yep.
But like, what's the most rock and roll thing you could do is play riffs on your crappy acoustic guitar. Yeah. Because that's what I did. Like, I remember, I have a vivid memory of like Audio Slave came out. I didn't know about Rage Against the Machine. because I was too young. But Audio Slave came out, and then I figured out later, oh, it's the Rage Against the Machine guys. And I remember that song, Coach Eyes, right?
Yeah.
And the music videos were much bigger back then, and I pirated the music video for that song, and I'd turn it up on my computer, and like jam out on my acoustic. I would fake jam on, like I'd turn up the song as loud as my computer speakers would go because my parents weren't home. It was like summer or whatever. Yeah. And I'd plug in my acoustic guitar into my amp and turn on the distortion and pretend that I knew what I was doing, you know? Yeah. And just like, it was so horrible, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. But just the feeling of like, this must be what rock and roll is. I have no idea otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's awesome. I think those are good stories. Like, I think, anybody who's a guitar player, and I used to teach this, you know, you start by having a guitar, and then you play with a guitar. Yeah. And then you learn to play guitar, and then you become a guitar player. It's, you know, it's like there is a level. And I think that's what everybody's trying to achieve is like, you know, I want to be able to play guitar. Well, what they're really saying is I want to be able to play music. I want to be a guitar player. Yeah. But you have to move beyond that. And this sort of a mantra that I've taken on is your actions lead to strategy. Yeah. When, like you were talking about songwriting, learning to play riffs, like
you think it's the other way around. You have to have a strategy.
You think you need to plan and everything, but the reality is, like, how do you write a song? You start writing songs. Right. You just start doing it. Yeah. And again, to the Tom Morello masterclass is great. Even as a seasoned guitar player, I learned stuff, but he writes an entire song in the thing by just, he picks up an acoustic guitar, makes like a 2 or 3 note riff, records it, puts a bass over it, puts an electric over it, doubles the electric guitar, throws a drum track on, and next thing you know, it's a whole song.
So cool.
But it just starts by doing. And then, of course, part of the doing is building the strategy of, oh, you know what? Actually, I think it would be cool if we changed the bridge. Yeah. But it's just taking action. So
that's what I did with, I told you, I did the EP and then I released that single. It's called Plenty of Time. And that was, I approached it totally different. I have a buddy named Tim Fasano who I met doing an EP for Alexa Jensen, who I play with right now. She's super talented. And we became good buddies, and he's got a studio up in his house. And I was kind of like, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after releasing the Elderson, I'm like, I got to keep doing stuff. And I had all these other little riffy things. And so that song we created by doing exactly that. Like I recorded this, and then I put drums on top, put bass on top, and then the lyrics were the very last thing. So.
Yeah, I've never been great at lyrics. I've tried and pushed myself, but that's not my thing. So what's next? What do you want to do next? What are you doing next? What's the next, like,
that's a good question. Yeah. So talking about, action and strategy, like if I'm being totally honest, I'm not like a good planner. I'm not a good admin person. I've had a lot of friends help me making spreadsheets and stuff with all that stuff. And so I think the plan is in the next 5 years, I want to be making money playing my music. Right now, it's like I'm teaching full time, and I've got, even with teaching full time, I have time to go out and do shows and stuff like that. But anytime I make money playing shows or selling merch or something like that, it's a bonus. Yeah. I'm able to do that because I have a full-time job. And I know that that's a more common thing now, the working musician. Sure. And I am fine with doing that and still pushing towards being able to tour. Yeah. So I'm, putting together some stuff to do, like a tour in the spring, probably like acoustic guitar house show tour in the spring. And I want to do my
should play here, by the way.
I would love to do that. Yeah. That would be amazing. I would love to do, I'd love to do more house shows, and like every quarter or so release a new single. That's kind of my plan for the next year.
I mean, that's a great plan. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of musicians, even in recent weeks, where they want to play, and it's like my advice is always just, so go play. Yeah. Like, pick up your instrument, sing, whatever you do, and just do it all the time. Yeah. With the internet, I mean, gosh, it's so crazy. In our generation, we would spend money buying microphones and a cheap PC to try to record a song, and then go get CDs, writable CDs, and we would do them one by one. Or if you're lucky, you had a tube
Give them to
disc
people.
burner.
Yeah.
Put them in sleeves, and then hopefully, if it didn't get scratched in that process, someone could listen to your months and months and months of effort.
Yeah.
And now, if you have a great idea, you can just pull your phone out and record it, and it might get viewed 100 times on a bad day.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll encourage you. I love watching your stuff on YouTube and Instagram. So plug away. Like, do you know your handles and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm the first Brandon Berg, BrandonBerg on Twitter and Instagram.
Really?
I caught that one before. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's not the first Brandon Berg. It's actually at Brandon Berg.
Yeah, at Brandon Berg. Yeah.
Awesome. Good job.
My Twitter though is just me being a jerk.
That's fine.
It doesn't represent my brand very well. That's the thing though, is trying to figure out, like, people are all about branding these days, but like literally anything you put on the internet is your brand. You know, whether or not you're being intentional or not. So.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that's
definitely my Instagram is like, an artist page, and then it's fairly personal too. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's who you are. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's you mean a lot to me, and it's awesome to have you on. And,
likewise, man.
See what your future brings. So
my first podcast.
Yeah, man.
This is fun.
Thanks for coming on. We'll have you come back out, and we'll talk about like philosophy or something the whole time.
Yeah.
So awesome.
We're gonna do a song too.
Yeah. So we're gonna change scenes here and just have you play a song or two, whatever you feel comfortable with. So
sweet.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
The song's called Diana. It's on the EP, Elderson. Diana, I saw you. Don't you pass me by. You saw me down the street when I caught your eye. Don't you know that this was meant to be? Don't you know often things in the mirror are closer than they seem? 'Cause I need you and you need me. This is more than a good deed, Diana. Can't you see? Red gas can in my hand. Could you bring it back? I said no problem. I got you. I will be right back. So now I'm sitting in your chair, I touch your foot and you touch my hair. We're both shedding all these tears, waiting just to flow for years. I need you, you need me. How on earth could this be, Diana? Diana, Diana. Can you see? Oh, can you see?